What would it be like to share your deepest, darkest secret? We all have one, a shame story. And that doesn't make it any less shameful because typically they exist in the dark. Maybe there is a certain event, situation that happened at some point in your past that you hope no one ever finds out about. Maybe you've shared it with a select few people. Maybe you've never told a soul. And Brené Brown says that keeping our shame in the dark is what enables it to actually grow and take over our entire lives, limiting our potential, limiting our capacity to connect with other people. But Brené Brown also says that it's important to be selective with who we share that story with. Not just any old person deserves to hear it. If you're considering making your shame story public, here are a few things you definitely want to keep in mind. Number one, share the scar, not the wound. That is a quote by Yara Golden, a copywriter. And essentially, you want to ask yourself, do I feel calm and comfortable with speaking this? So for example, let's say that an event happened that you feel is unspeakable. The first step is to write out that story. And the second step will be to actually speak it, record yourself speaking it in private. And then consider selecting a trusted friend to share some aspects of the story with if you feel a sense of calm when sharing the story. And this is not to be confused with a sense of overwhelm, so you shut down and you're numb. This is a true sense of calm where you have that clarity provided by the narrative therapy and where you're able to relay the story, not necessarily without emotion, but certainly you're not breaking down and you can speak in a normal tone, not a whisper, not a yell. The second consideration is, are you actually detached from the reaction or lack thereof? So let's imagine that you share this story. Imagine that you submit it to a pitch competition and they're looking for the most interesting, fucked up shit. And you're like, ooh, I win. Okay, I will win this, right? So let's say that you submit to this hypothetical competition and you don't even make it to the finals. You don't even get to speak with anyone after you poured your heart out in the video. How do you feel? If you're seeking validation from sharing the story, it's not coming from the right place. It's not coming from a healed place. And just knowing that sometimes certain things will not always be healed. Maybe they never fully heal, but there are gradations of empowerment when it comes to having a sense of clarity within that story. And third, what's your intention in sharing? Are you wanting to create a greater sense of emotional closeness with your partner? Are you wanting some more control? Maybe a little bit of guilt that you can instill in the other person or people? Do you want to be famous? These are considerations to have before you go public with whatever that story is, to ensure that it's something that is actually beneficial. You know what's always a winner? Focusing on the emotional experience that you had during and as a result of the experience. We all know the end result, it's shame. And maybe during whatever the experience was, maybe you felt a combination of things. Maybe you felt lonely, maybe you felt sad, angry. That is how we connect with people. Certainly, sharing a story, there are people who may conjure up an image and think, oh, I've been in pretty much the same situation, and there can be a trauma bond that forms. But what helps us actually connect with a greater amount of people, being vulnerable without necessarily sharing too much before we're ready, is focusing on, is sharing what your emotional experience was. Because Sure, there are certain situations where maybe the lines are fuzzy. Who was the victim? Who was the perpetrator? And, where many of us are familiar with gaslighting. So especially if you're still figuring that out for yourself with, let's say, a childhood event, or maybe something happened in your adult life, shame can blur the lines a bit. So I just want to be sure that you are feeling vulnerable and empowered at the same time. And it can happen. So if you do feel compelled to share more, start with the emotional experience. I'll give a few examples. So let's say that a part of your story contains, let's say, an element of criminality, sexual abuse, and eating disorder. So we'll start with the criminality. The emotional experience there can consist of feelings of being misunderstood, feelings of being villainized, feelings of being discarded, of being labeled. So those are things to potentially speak to. And when it comes to sexual abuse, there can be feelings of violation. There can be feelings of deep loneliness. There can be feelings of disgust. And when it comes to an eating disorder, different feelings that you can discuss there include self-loathing, self-critical, and sick. Those are just 3 examples. And another thing to keep in mind is that everyone has a shame story. Not everyone shares it. And certainly there can be gossip where maybe a story that sounds like a shame story isn't even true, but it can still cause shame nonetheless. But it's not about gossip. It's not about what other people think. It's not about other people's interpretation of your truth. It's about gaining that sense of clarity through the narrative therapy, through speaking it for you, and feeling a sense of peace, feeling a sense of self-understanding, feeling a sense of empowerment to move forward and be exactly the person that you want to be. Wishing you so much healing, so much self-expression, lots of love. Until next time. Feeling calm and grounded really sets the stage for that next level leadership power. And I would love to invite you into a very special self-paced container, the Confidence Boost Meditation Program. It's a 21-day, 11-minute-a-day program that you can actually get for $50 off because you are a YouTube subscriber. Go ahead to thestephaniemichelle.com/confidence boost and use code YouTube50 at checkout.